Hello everyone, my name is Natalie and welcome to the Mighty Quill. Today I'm super excited to bring to you my review of Scythe by Neal Shusterman. Scythe is the first book in a YA dystopian utopian sci-fi series called The Arc of a Scythe. It takes place on a futuristic Earth where humankind has become so advanced that they have completely eradicated hunger, poverty, disease, war, even death. And the entire world is ruled and managed by the Thunderhead, which is basically if the cloud became sentient. However, there's one catch to this seemingly perfect post-mortality world, and that is the issue of overpopulation. To combat this issue, an organization called the Scythedom was formed, and its members, called Scythes, are tasked with gleaning. Basically, it's their job to go out and kill people as a means of population control. The book primarily focuses on two teens, Citra and Rowan, who are chosen by Scythe Faraday to be his apprentices and to train in the art of death, risking their own lives if they don't succeed. Unfortunately, a tragic event separates Citra and Rowan, and they are taken under the wings of Scythe Curie and Scythe Goddard, respectively. This sets them up on two very different paths, and in the process of trying to become part of the new generation of Scythes, they become rivals. I am still unsure of how I'm going to do my reviews, but for this particular one, I'm going to be giving you 3 things I loved about this book and 3 things either I disliked or you might not like as a reader. I gave Scythe 5 stars out of 5 on Goodreads, so if you're curious to see why I love this book so much, keep watching. Let's start with the things that I enjoyed. The first being the characters. Not only does Scythe have a very character-driven plot, but I find the characters to be both very realistic and relatable. The first main character, Rowan, has some of the most compelling development in this book. Although he is initially chosen by Scythe Faraday for his compassion and empathy for other people, these are traits that he eventually struggles to retain, and he starts to morph into this gritty, morally great character. We really get to see him grapple with difficult choices in an environment and in situations that challenge what he believes and who he is as a person. Our other main character, Citra, doesn't have quite as compelling development, and this is partly because it's a lot less obvious and extreme. Her development focuses mainly on her growing confidence in herself and her abilities, and we see her find her passion and ultimately forging her purpose and her place in the Scythedom. I also find Citra to be a very admirable character. Citra is clever, hardworking, resourceful, and extremely loyal and willing to do anything for the people she cares about. So although she's not kicking bad guy butt and eating dragons for breakfast on the daily, I still classify her as a strong female character. Another character that plays a big role in the book is Goddard, who is not only one of Rowan's mentors, but is also the villain of the book. And we learn it very, very early on. He runs in the vein of that ruthless, bloodthirsty, but suave villain archetype. Goddard's been at work for years, kind of undermining the Scythedom. He either truly believes in what he wants for the future of the Scythedom, or pretends so convincingly that he has amassed a cult following within the Scythedom. He also serves as a huge catalyst for character development in this book, as a good villain should. The second thing that I loved about the book was its world. According to Neal Shusterman, the purpose of Scythe was to explore the possible consequences of a perfect world. In an interview, he says, and I quote, "It's not just a matter of telling a story within a world, it's making that world extend beyond the borders of this story." He wanted to make a futuristic utopia that also felt very real, and I fully agree with this. I thought the world building was fairly well executed and complex. I think out of the YA sci-fi books that I've read, it's probably one of the most plausible futures. In the world of Scythe, people's immortality can be greatly attributed to nanites, which are kind of like these tiny little robots or something in people's bodies. They regulate your health, they heal your injuries, regulate your pain, and they are ultimately what's responsible for reviving you if you're in a situation that in our age would actually kill you. You're simply rendered deadish. Think of it like the Princess Bride scene with Miracle Max. You're mostly dead, not fully dead. Even though it is supposedly a post-mortality world, there are actually two different ways that you can die permanently. And the first is fire, because it would damage your body too much and also damage the nanites. The other way to die is by scythe. And it's not because scythes are given some kind of special power or ability to render you permanently dead. It's because the Thunderhead is not allowed to interfere with Scythedom matters. The Scythedom is a completely separate entity, and since the Thunderhead is in control of things like emergency services, they are not allowed to trigger the nanites' healing process if you are chosen to be gleaned. There's also no organized religion in the world except for this separatist cult-like group called the Tonists. I still don't fully grasp what they believe. Religion is probably the least fleshed out part of the world building, because we never get an explanation as to why religion no longer exists. The third thing that I loved about Scythe is the character's relationship with death. As I read Scythe, I definitely became more aware of the juxtaposition between how we see and are aware of our own mortality and how the characters in the book and the world they live in is mindfulness of its immortality. There are thousands of ways to die, and yet we rarely think about it unless we are suddenly confronted with death. And we don't like being confronted with the reality of our mortality. It's a very shocking thing for us to process. Then you see the people in this book, some of whom are putting themselves in dangerous situations where they could get killed on purpose. They are doing it for fun. I mean, we're not just talking about skydiving at this point. We're talking about jumping out of a plane without a parachute to save you. They still greatly revere the Scythes and recognize their power to end their immortality, and this recognition makes them very afraid of the Scythes. They are so careful with their interactions with the Scythes. They are afraid of offending them and getting gleaned as a result. And you really see a widespread misunderstanding of the Scythes in that perception of them, because most Scythes aren't going to glean you for bumping into them in the street. And that takes me to like a subgrouping of this third reason that I love Scythe, and that's the Scythe's relationship with death. In figuring out how to construct the world, Neal Shusterman realized once we stole death from nature, we would be obliged to be its sole distributor. And so he created this order of Scythes, and they are called Scythes because a scythe is the tool of a reaper, and these individuals were the tools of society. They didn't glean because they wanted to. It was because they needed to, because civilization required it. One of the rules of the Scythedom is that to become a scythe, you cannot want to be a scythe. You cannot want to kill. And this goes towards creating a highly ethical and moral order to try and curb corruption within the Scythedom. In addition to these 10 commandments, they have quotas and caps on how many people Scythes can glean. They also have diversity requirements. The Scythedom does recognize the fact that it is a very heavy burden, especially considering their immortality. Because of this, they've developed different ways to help Scythes cope with this lifestyle. The first being they are allowed to develop their own techniques for gleanings. For example, Scythe Faraday, who originally takes on Citra and Rowan, he gleans based on statistics from what they call the age of mortality. That is the age we live in. He also prepares the person who he is gleaning. He tells them how he's going to kill them, and he offers them a moment of comfort. And to kind of make up for his actions, he attends their funerals afterwards. Then you have Scythe Curie, who takes on Citra later on in the book, and she tries to embody the unexpected nature of death. She does her gleanings in a very unexpected, quick manner. She'll go out in the streets and look for people who she perceives are stagnant in their life, and those are the people that she kills. Being one of the oldest Scythes in the order, she's developed a deep understanding of grief. She will go to the families of those she has gleaned, invite them over for dinner, and give them an opportunity to act on their grief. She hands them the sword she killed their family member with and gives them an opportunity to kill her in the same way. Inside Faraday and Curie, we also see how being a Scythe affects your relationships with other people. In their actions and decisions, we see that they really care about their apprentices, and I think this is partly due to the fact that one of the 10 commandments of the Scythedom is that you're not allowed to be in any kind of relationship. You can't marry or have children, and so Citra and Rowan are like their own children. And then you have Scythe Goddard, who is a very sharp contrast. He engages in these very public, random, and brutal massacres. He's extremely bloodthirsty, and he has no regret. He doesn't do anything to make up for his actions. Additionally, Scythes are required to write down their experiences and thoughts in journals, and some of these journal entries are actually included in between chapters. So it's a really cool aspect of this book because we're getting to see into what it's like to be a Scythe even more. We're getting to see its effect on people. And we also get to see how Citra and Rowan's perspective of death develops as the book goes on. And we even get the opportunity to see some of their journals. Now, I've raved about this book so far, but it's time to address the 3 cons. Starting with the element that I personally disliked, and that is the romantic subplot between Citra and Rowan. They're only directly together under Faraday for a few months, which to me is not realistically enough time to get to know someone well enough to fall in love. Additionally, we see that they're attracted to each other, but we never know why. They're willing to do all these things for each other and go to all these extremes to protect each other, but we don't know why. We don't get that foundation. I think a strong friendship would have benefited this book much more than the weak romance that it does have, at least starting out. While a lot of the actions and decisions Citra and Rowan make stem from their romance, the actual romance doesn't get very much page time. It plays a major part in the basic premise of Scythe, but it doesn't actually play a major part in the actual plot, if that makes sense. So for that reason, I still maintain my rating. I can see how they could work together, and I think their character development sets up some really interesting interactions and character dynamics in the following books, and I'm looking forward to see how their romantic relationship will develop. The next con to this book is the pacing. Towards the end, it gets kind of rushed. There's a lot of things going on there, lots of action and traveling in a short period of time. Some readers also complain of a slow start, especially when Citra and Rowan are training under Scythe Faraday. This is partly due to the fact that a lot of their character development starts after they're separated. This supposedly slow start actually was helpful to me in getting a feel for the characters and the world they lived in. Overall, there was a really good integration of the world building. It was more like we were experiencing the world alongside the characters. The final con is probably the most common complaint in negative reviews. Again, this is something that didn't bother me, but can be an issue for some people. And this reason is logical fallacy. From what these people pointed out, there were some holes, not necessarily in the world as a whole, but in the Scythedom, in some of the rules and policies. And there could have been some measures taken during the book to change the rules and thus fix some of the issues that were going on in the political sphere. Suspension of belief is a primary element of a lot of sci-fi and fantasy books. It's required. I also found this flawed system and characters' approaches to it to be realistic, and again, it kind of fits into that plausibility of the future. At the time the book picks up, the Scythe has already existed for a very long time, and they've had plenty of time to undergo changes in their political, cultural, and ideological landscape that the founders of the Scythe couldn't necessarily foresee when they were making the Ten Commandments and any other additional policies. The rules have to fit not only the time in which they're being made, but also the future. And that is a really challenging thing. And we still see conflict today with how our laws and the Constitution are interpreted and applied to new issues that weren't necessarily around or just weren't major concerns of the founding fathers. A lot of the original sides do exist unless they've self-gleaned. But we see in the book that the older sides are very reluctant to change. They are afraid of it. They're afraid of the changes Goddard is making within the Scythedom, but they're even more afraid of the changes they'll have to make in order to stop him. They would rather not give up their traditions at all. And again, this is something I see as realistic and relatable to modern times. As a conclusion, I think that the characters are relatable and realistic, both to the environment in which they live, in terms of how this increasing political corruption affects them in different ways, and also in terms of the nature of the world. That encompasses their immortality mindset and also how being a Scythe affects and shapes them. It's a plausible future given the advancements that we have made today. It makes you evaluate how your decisions and beliefs can affect other people in the short term and the long term. And it also makes you reevaluate how you view death. Overall, it's a really thought-compelling book. I love Neal Shusterman's writing style and how he chooses his issues and concepts and how he grapples with them over the course of the book. He excels in executing these concepts in a way that is engaging, compelling, and relevant. The overall premise of Scythe is extremely basic and overdone. Teens get specially selected and have to train for something. They're pitted against one another, and then there's the forbidden love aspect. There's nothing new under the sun, so it's not the premise that makes a story unique. It's what the author chooses to do with it. It's all in the characters and the world building, in the plot twist. Ultimately, the thoughtfulness and the execution of Scythe is why I enjoy it so much. If you're looking for a book that has a character-driven plot, political intrigue, and brings a fresh and thoughtful spin on the YA sci-fi genre, then I cannot recommend Scythe more highly to you. If you have read the book, then let me know down in the comments what you thought of it. If you're interested, I will link that Neal Shusterman interview in the description box, as well as some of those more negative reviews, especially the ones focusing on logical fallacy. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was informative and helpful to you. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel to see more content. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep reading, and I will see you next time here on The Mighty Quill.